Hey guys, it's Willing Away and welcome back to Through the Parks. So before we start today's episode covering Katmai National Park, I do want to cover some things. I know this one is definitely later than planned. I had a lot of research and just college kind of intervened, so it took a little bit. It's going to be a little bit later, but covering that for future episodes instead of 2 a week, because researching these, and I think I've covered almost all of the smaller research ones, so now we're getting into like the bigger ones with multiple pages to cover of research. I'm thinking about pushing Through the Parks to just release on Saturdays, so one episode a week for Through the Parks, but to cover for Tuesday, because I still want to post at 2 episodes of something a week. Tuesdays will either be like Let's Plays or just, Let's Plays if I have them, video games we're currently playing, or possibly when I get Tragic Thicket up and running, creepy stories, stuff like that. So that's just keep an eye out that. This Tuesday and the final part for that Let's Play will be going up, and then the next Saturday will be another park I haven't decided yet. But that's just kind of things I wanted to cover, just short and simple. We have 8 pages of research to cover, so let's get into the overall info. Katmai is located in southwest Alaska, so another Alaskan park. We just covered Kabuk Valley on Tuesday, and now we're at Katmai. It is located in southwest Alaska and is known for the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, and also known for its brown bears. The park contains 4,093,070. I can speak. 4,093,077 acres, and is the size of Connecticut and New Jersey. So most of the park is designated wilderness area and is named after Mount Katmai, which is called a stratovolcano. It is found on the Alaskan Peninsula, which is right across from Kodiak Island. The headquarters for the park are found in the nearby King Salmon, which is 290 miles southwest of Anchorage. In 1918, the area was designated a national monument after the 1912 volcanic eruption of Nova Rupta to protect the area around it. This eruption would create the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, which is a 40 square mile, 100 to 700 feet deep pyroclastic flow. The park contains 18 volcanoes, however, only 7 have ever been active since the 1900s, and due to the park's volcanic history, the park is left undeveloped and unvisited up until the 1950s. The area in the monument would eventually be appreciated for its wildlife and the sockeye salmon and brown bears. After some boundary expansions, the present park and preserve was established in 1980 under what is called the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. Oof, that is a long one. We're going to cover, it's going to go geography, activities, climate, ecosystems, history, and then all the way down there, environmental issues that are currently going on today. So if you're interested in the histories, it'll be towards the bottom, but if you want to go through everything, then we'll start with the geography right now. Katmai is on the Pacific Ocean side of the Alaska Peninsula, which is opposite Kodiak Island, and is on the Shelikof Strait. This park's major features are the coast, the Aleutian Range, the chain of 15 volcanic mountains, and large lakes. The closest town to the park is King Salmon, and the park's headquarters is located 5 miles from the park's entrance. The Alaska Peninsula Highway connects the Naknek Lake near the entrance to King Salmon, and then connects to the mouth of the river at Naknek. The road is not connected to Alaska's road system, and access to the park is by boat over the Naknek Lake. Roads that overlook the Valley of 10,000 Smokes runs from Brooks Camp to Three Forks, and the 497-mile-long coastline has many deep indents and runs from Cook Inlet to Cape Kubugakli. There are going to be a lot of difficult names. I'm going to try my best to pronounce them, but I'm so sorry if I mispronounce any. The mountains of the park are about 15 miles inland and go from southwest to northeast. The park is next to McNeil River State Game Sanctuary and Refuge, which is on the Kamshak Bay. The Alkanac River, which is considered a wild river, starts inside the preserve at Kukak Lake, and the Nanak River starts within the park also. The park adjoins Beckroff National Wildlife Refuge and contains 3,922,529 acres that don't allow sports and subsistence hunting. Meanwhile, 418,548 acres allows for sport and subsistence hunting. Most of the hunted species in the area are brown bears. However, problems due to hunting the bears has arisen due to their small population and people stalking them too close to the limits of the park. The rocks on the Alaskan Peninsula are divided by the Bruin Bay Fault to rocks of Jurassic and Cretaceous age in the east and metamorphic and igneous rocks in the west. Most of the higher mountains of the park are of volcanic origin, and the park has been altered by glaciation that have sculpted the mountains along with excavating the many lakes. The park features different outwash plains, terminal moraines, several different soil types from rock to volcanic ash, wet soils with peat and permafrost, which is only found at higher elevations. Two of the size physiographic provinces cover the park. This is the Aleutian Range province and the Nushagak Bristol Bay lowlands province in the west. The Aleutian Range is composed of the Shiklof Strait coastline and the Aleutian Mountain Zone, along with the Hudsonian Zone. The Nushagak Bristol Bay lowlands province is separated by the Bruin Bay Fault and only occupies a very small corner of the park. Now we get into one of the bigger portions of this park, in geography, the volcanoes, considering there are like 18 of them. So active volcanoes in the park only include Mount Katmai, Novarupta, Trident Volcano, Mount Magique, Mount Martin, and Four Peak Mountain. The other volcanoes are Mount Douglas, Mount Griggs, Snowy Mountain, Mount Denison, Mount Kukak, Devil's Desk, Mount Kaguyak, Mount Cerberus, Falling Mountain, and Kajuluk Volcano. The most significant volcano event that ever happened in June 1912 when Mount Katmai and Novarupta erupted. This eruption would produce proclastic flow that would eventually cover the nearby valley in over 300 feet of ash. During this time, the summit of Katmai would collapse into a cauldron, and as the deposits would cool, steam would eventually rise, and the valley would earn the name Valley of 10,000 Smokes. Due to this steam, the canyons have got 100 feet deeper and only 5 to 10 feet wider. Katmai Mountain was also considered a stratovolcano and was 6,716 feet tall and is considered to have the largest summit caldera. Aside from the 1912 eruption, there's been no significant activity. It hasn't occurred at any time. And Novarupta is considered a Plinian proclastic vent with a plug dome. It has a 6,600 feet crater with a 1,300 feet dome in the middle. Trident is the name of a complex 3 stratovolcanoes. The highest one is at 3,599 feet tall and has been intermittently active between 1953 and 1974. During that time, 0.7 kilometers of material has erupted from the southwest Trident, which formed from a site of large fumarolic pit. Mount Martin is 6,102 feet tall and partly overlaps the much older Algogogshak volcano. The summit of the mountain has a 980 feet crater, which contains fumaroles and a crater lake. Lava flow extends from the mountain to fill the upper area of Angels Creek Valley with 5 cubic kilometers of material. Although this mountain has had no significant eruptions, it does emit steam and earthquake swarms. Magique, which is on the same sedimentary rocks as Martin, has 4 vents and is high, and the highest peak is at 7,103 feet and has 3 subsidiary vent cones. Apart from steam, there's been no recent activity. However, in 1912, large debris avalanche did occur. Four Peaked Mountain is also a stratovolcano with a probable vent at the summit and is covered by the Four Peaked Glacier. In September 2006, Four Peaked would produce phreatic eruptions. Mount Griggs Mount Griggs is a 7,602-foot stratovolcano, which is near Nova Ruptia. This mountain has three concentric craters, and the largest is 4,900 feet wide. Griggs also contains active sulfurous fumaroles. Snowy Mountain is considered a small volcano, however it is 7,090 feet tall and has 10 significant glaciers on almost all of the mountain. 1/3 to 1/2 of the park has been eroded by these glaciers, and the volcano has two vents about 2.5 miles apart and has an active fumaroles at the tallest summit. Mount Dennis is 7,605 feet peak with 4 vents at the head of 3 glaciers and is also the tallest point in the park. Mount Kukak is an ice-covered volcano and is 6,693 feet tall and has a strong fumarole near the summit. Devil's Desk is a eroded stratovolcano at 6,411 feet tall, and Kaguyak is a stratovolcano shortened by a caldera like Katmai. The highest peak is 2,956 feet with a 1.6 mile crater lake and contains 2 large domes in the caldera and on the flanks. Mount Douglas is a stratovolcano at 7,021 feet tall and was eroded by ice and contains a very small acidic crater lake at the summit. Mount Stellar, which is located between Kukak and Denison, stands at 7,454 feet tall and has an unknown number of vents with the ice-covered terrain. Kujalleq is 4,977 feet tall and is a eroded volcanic remnant. However, none of these volcanoes have exhibited any significant features unless otherwise specified, so like Katmai and Nova Ruptia. But as of that, there's been no really significant behavior from those. And that covers the geography. Most of it was volcanoes, considering there are 18 of them, and 18 is a lot of volcanoes to have. So that covers our geography. Now we get into the activities. What can you do at Katmai? Well, in Katmai, you can hike, backpack, camp, backcountry ski, fish, kayak, go on boat tours, and join different interpretive programs. The park is best known for its Alaskan brown bears and the sockeye salmon. It contains the largest protected brown bear population, which is estimated at 2,200 bears. The bears usually congregate at the Brook Falls during salmon spawning season, and many photos of the bears have been taken there. The salmon arrive early to Brook Falls, and around 43 to 70 bears have been documented at the falls in July, and an equal number of bears have also been seen lower in the river during September. Areas such as Halo Bay, Kukak Bay, Kuliak Bay, Kafila Bay, Geographic Harbor, and Chiniak Bay have very easy access to clams, sedge, and salmon and other fish, leading to these areas to have high populations of bears year-round. Some other hot spots in the park are Sweetschwak, I believe, Lagoon, American Creek, Morion Creek, and Funnel Creek. Most of Katmai's visitors, however, do arrive to Brooks Camp, one of the only developed areas in the park, and very few ever go farther than the bear viewing platforms. The park rangers are very protective of the bears in the park, and they try their best to not allow bears to get near human food or really ever run into humans. Due to this, most of the bears in the park aren't really afraid of humans and are very uninterested in them. The bears can be seen through park cams by the National Park Service during the times of July and September. These are the best times to view them, considering I believe it's like right before hibernation, so that's where they're all eating up, getting fatter, getting ready to hibernate. Lodging is available at the park, however, it is available at Brooks Camp and Grosvenor Lodge. There are other lodges scattered throughout the park, but those are the two main ones. And that covers it for activities. Katmai is definitely like Kobuk Valley. It's in Alaska. Probably doesn't get too many visitors. The main thing people go there for are the bears. There is something I will mention at the end of this park that I am really into, and a lot of other people are really into about this park, and it's one of the bigger things with this park, but I'll wait for that considering it is my favorite, and I'll probably go on a rant about it at the end. Now we move into the climate. What is Katmai National Park's climate? I think we can already guess what kind of climate it is. It is a subarctic climate that has very cool summers and year-round rain. That's about it. It's subarctic. I think we covered that same climate in Kobuk Valley, considering they're both in Alaska. Just think A lot of snow, rain, winter, cold, just cold in general. Now we get into ecosystems. So the animals, kind of like the environment, that kind of stuff. So summer temps tend to reach a high of 63 degrees Fahrenheit, and winters tend to reach lows at -4 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Fall is considered the driest season. Rain is heavier near the coast and gets up to 60 inches, while it is lighter inland. The park has a total of 29 different mammal species, 137 different bird species, 24 fresh fish species, and 4 migrating fish species. God, species started to not sound like a word anymore. The mammal species that can be found in Katmai include your snowshoe hare, moose, timber wolf, brown bear, coyote, beaver, lynx, wolverine, river otter, mink, Arctic and red fox, weasel, porcupine, and martens. Meanwhile, the marine mammals you can find include your harbor seal, sea lion, sea otter, beluga whale, killer whale, and gray whale. Caribou can also be found in the park, however, they are usually there during winter seasons. The most important fish in the park is considered the sockeye salmon, which feeds most of the bears and bald eagles around the parks due to their migration. And common plants in the park include beachhead iris, Nootka, lupin, and woolly geranium. That's about covers it for ecosystems. A lot of these are shorter, besides obviously the geography and what we're about to get into, the history. I believe this is our longest section. This is going to cover a lot. We have 3 different sections. We have pre-contact period and archaeology, Russians and Americans, national monument, and we do have 4, national park and preserve, and then that'll be it for our history. So we're going to start off with our first section, one of the smaller ones, the pre-contact period and archaeology. So prehistoric artifacts have been found dating back to 6,000 years. Other sites have been found near the coast, both near Kaguyak and Kukak. These sites include 49 AF3, which is near Kanatak, and 49 MK10. These sites show evidence of habitation up to the 1912 eruption, but have not been investigated very thoroughly or fully. The Amalek Bay Archaeological District contains evidence of very early human activity, and those date back to 7,000 years. Brooks Camp is listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1977 and designated as a National Historic Landmark in 1993. The site itself, though, dates back to 4,500 years before present. An abandoned village near the mouth of Savonoski River is also known as the Old Savonoski Site, and the DIL 161 site is also located in the Alleganak River. And that about kind of covers it for the pre-contact history, mainly just stating historical sites around the park, where we have found evidence of very early human activity. Now we move on to the Russians and Americans section. So Russians were the first Europeans to arrive in the area en masse, and they mainly would focus on trading fur. They would encounter the Gemut Eskimos on Bristol Bay and the Koningag Eskimos on the Shilakov Strait. Katmai Village was where the Europeans were within the park, and they would eventually live there through the mid-19th century. In the later 19th century, however, more villages would start to be established at Severnosky, Douglas, and Kukak. The Alaskan commercial company would eventually take the place of the Russians as the sea otter trade would dry up, leading to Katmai and Douglas to be abandoned in the early 20th century. During the 1890s, a route to Nome was running due to Nome's gold rush. A writer, Rex Beach, would eventually write about the life in Bristol Bay during the salmon run in what is called, quote-unquote, the Silver Horde. And oil, gold, and coal would be briefly paid attention to before eventually dying out in 1912. By 1898, reports of earthquakes in the vicinity of Katmai Pass would be reported, and by June 1st, 1912, these would intensify, leading up to some people leaving. On June 6th, Katmai and Novorupsha would erupt with noises heard in Fairbanks, 500 miles away, and Juneau, 750 miles away. Eruptions would occur through June 7th, but eventually decline on the 8th. 6 to 12 inches of ash would fall in Kodiak. Meanwhile, ash also fell as far as Puget Sound. Haze was noted around the world and were eventually depressed in the northern hemisphere during the last 6 months of 1912. Mount Katmai was believed to be the initial eruption site, but later, in 1954, Nova Rupta was eventually found to be the initial eruption site. The regions around the mountains were devastated due to all the ash, and eventually the National Geographic Society would back 5 different expeditions to Katmai. The first one started in 1915. They would visit Kodiak Island and have a short stay on the mainland. This expedition was led by Robert Fisk Griggs. Griggs was a botanist and was, at the time, studying plant recolonization. Griggs would eventually have another expedition in 1916 and would discover and name the Valley of 10,000 Smokes and Nova Rupta. The National Geographic Society was delighted with the discoveries and would eventually fund another expedition in 1917. The National Geographic magazine would eventually bring the region into the public's eye, and Griggs would start advocating for protection of the region under National Park services. During this time, legislation to establish Denali National Park was still pending, and the idea to make Katmai a park was discussed with the National Park Service Director, Horace M. Albright, and the National Geographic Society President, Gilbert Hovey Grosvenor, I believe. Albert stated that it was likely that the park would not become a national park as of right now, but instead that it should be protected as a national monument by the president using the Antiquities Act of 1906. After some negotiation in a 1918 expedition, a proclamation to protect the 1,080,000 acres around Mount Katmai was discussed. Although it was only 1/3 of what the present park is today, at the time it was already half the size of Yellowstone. And eventually, President Woodrow would sign the proclamation of Katmai National Monument on September 24th, 1918. And now I get into the National Monument, considering that for quite a while it was deemed a national monument and not a national park. So this proclamation to make it a national monument would do very little immediate effect, and on 23rd, I believe, another expedition was sent to the region and found little exploitable mineral potential. Tourists would begin in the early 1920s, however there were very few, and at the time no national park staff were assigned to the park. By 1928, more visitors would arrive, and the most prominent of them was Father Bernard R. Hubbard, who would gain fame as the quote-unquote glacier priest. Hubbard would document the Valley of 10,000 Smokes in different movies and would show them up until the 1950s. During this time, the Park Service would discover the park to be the best habitat for grizzlies and would start to try to expand the park to protect them and the salmon spawning grounds. In 1931, President Hoover would expand the monument to 2,697,590 acres, which was more than doubling the size of the park, making it, at the time, or I believe currently, the biggest park in the Park Service unit. Brooks Camp would be added, and coastal areas would be avoided in case of potential oil use. And in 1937, the first ranger was finally assigned to the park. In 1938, the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries would establish a camp at Brooks Lake Outlet after having previously blasted out that part of the area of the falls in 1921. At that time, the Park Service would become concerned for illegal trapping and would eventually ask the Alaska Fish and Game Commission to help send out wardens to patrol the area. These wardens would capture several different trappers, and the Park Service personnel would eventually visit this monument and send back reports on the scenery and wildlife. These reports and efforts to make the poaching of the animals in the park more difficult would lead to another boundary expansion that would occur a little later, around 1941, by President Franklin Roosevelt, and would be signed to include the islands of Schliekoff Strait and Cook Inlet. Poaching would increase after World War II. At the same time, the Alaskan territorial interests sought to have the monument de-established or reduced in size to allow mining and fishing due to the fact that the Valley of 10,000 Smokes activity had declined. The Park Service said no, obviously. And they also wanted to state that the Park Service had made no effort to develop the monument for visitors, and this was kind of part of their reason that they wanted to decrease the size. yet again, the proposals were turned aside, and in 1950, a seasonal ranger was assigned to Katmai. William Nancaro would build a small camp at Brooks River, and by the mid-1950s, the Park Service would embark on the Mission 66 program and work on expanding visitor services. Katmai was to receive a headquarters at King Salmon, a visitor center at Valley Junction, and then in the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, different ranger stations, campgrounds, and some roads and dock facilities on the lakes. An airstrip was also proposed for Brooks Camp, but it was not built, and eventually a road from Brooks Camp was just built. In the early 1960s, a road was proposed that would run across the peninsula through the park and connect it to King Salmon. The Park Service opposed this proposal, and the 1964 Alaska earthquake would eventually stall the proposal for even longer, and eventually it would resurface in 1968 with local support. However, yet again, the National Park Service would oppose these plans, and the road project was eventually just set aside. In the meantime, however, headquarters facilities were eventually developed at King Salmon, and in 1967, the state of Alaska would have set aside what is called the McNeil River State Game Sanctuary that had 85,000 acres, and that was under the reason to help safeguard the bear fishing grounds on the river, which were adjacent to Katmai. McNeil River was declared eventually a national natural landmark in 1968, and in the 1990s, a state game refuge with 120,000 acres was established, and it was north of the sanctuary, and it was declared to protect Chinook Lake, and it would support a smaller fish run attracting bears. This refuge would expand by 128,000 acres, and it has remained closed to hunting despite an attempt in 2005 by Governor Frank to open it, I'm guessing. Recently, there have been proposals to merge these sanctuaries and refuge into Katmai, and when George B. Hartscott Jr. became director of the National Park Service in 1964, he would commission a report on Alaskan public lands entitled Operation Great Land. This study would identify 39 sites that might become preserves or recreation lands, and it recommended that Katmai be expanded somewhat to the west and substantially to the north. These boundary adjustments were amended to a westward expansion of 94,547 acres, and President Lyndon B. Johnson would sign this in 1968, and it would produce a lot of anger in Alaska. In 1961, Katmai would finally gain a full-time on-site park superintendent. Also, in that time, Congress passed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which established a framework to divide up Alaska's federal lands. The NACSA would establish a timetable for claims, withdrawals, and designations, and required the Park Service to come up with a plan for future park units. The Park Service would propose 33 million acres of new parklands, among them a 1,218,490 acre expansion of Katmai. And through the mid-1970s, there was a variety of different proposals that circulated for the expansion and wilderness designation. At the same time, concerns were also raised about the withdrawal of game lands from sport hunting and the ability of local residents to continue their practice of subsistence hunting. To address these concerns, legislation was proposed to help create national preserve lands that would confer protection while also allowing regulated sport hunting. Early versions of the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, or ANILCA, proposed that Katmai National Park and Preserve as a combination of park and preserve lands. This legislation was, however, stalled in Congress by 1978, and because a deadline was approaching for state selection of public lands, President Carter would use his authority under the Antiquities Act to expand Katmai by, yet again, 1,370,000 acres on December 1st, 1978, on the northern side of the monument. Now we get into our final section of history, the National Park and Preserve. This is, yet again, a really small section, so it took 2 more years for Congress to finally act on a final ANILCA bill, and on December 2nd, 1980, the final bill was established. and it established Katmai National Park and Reserve with 1,037 acres of additional park, bringing it to a total of 3,674,529.33 acres and 308,000 acres of preserve, with 3,384,358 acres of wilderness lands. However, unlike most ANILCA parks, the legislation of Katmai did not grant subsistence hunting access to national park lands, only to the preserve lands. Sport and subsistence hunting is prohibited in Katmai National Park, but is allowed in the preserve. And we finally get into our kind of last section, which are the environmental issues, and that has to do with the Exxon Valdez oil spill. So the grounding of the oil tanker Exxon Valdez in Prince William Sound on March 24th, 1989, produced an extensive contamination of the Katmai coastline. By early April, oil had reached Kenai Fords National Park. Oil would reach Cap Douglas and Katmai on April 26 and points southwards in the following weeks. In early May, a variety of dredges and skimmer vessels were working in the Shelkoff Strait, but 90% of the Katmai coastline was oiled. The worst hit areas were Cap Chiniak and Chiniak Lagoon, Halo Bay Beach and its lagoon, Cap Gull and Kafila Bay, and Cap Douglas. Casualties in birds alone were estimated at 8,400 dead birds, and eventually work would resume in 1990, with smaller efforts in 1991 to catch the last oil. And that is as much as they provided me with this oil spill. I don't know currently if they're able to clean it all up, what is going on with it. I just haven't looked into that. And that's about it. That ends our covering of Katmai. It felt like a lot more research than I just read. I don't know why. There is one last thing I want to mention before we end off. Katmai is also really, really well known for Fat Bear Week. If you don't know what Fat Bear Week, oh my god. Okay, so Fat Bear Week is basically a week in Katmai where you can watch the bear cams due to the fact that it gets, this is like their time to get fat for hibernation. And during Fat Bear Week, they will put these bears and take photos of these bears during the days of, them getting bigger and stuff like that. And what they will do is you vote on the fattest bear. You vote on which bear you think is the most prepared for hibernation. It is so much fun. Oh my god. Fat Bear Week is such a, if you've never seen it, please look it up. I love Fat Bear Week. I want to cover it one day in depth, but today's not the day considering this is just about Katmai. But if you want to get into something fun with national parks that you can do from home, you don't have to go to Katmai. You can literally just stay at home. Fat Bear Week is definitely a fun thing to participate in. I love it so much. And yeah, that's about it. Go have fun with Fat Bear Week. I hope you learned something new. And until our next adventure, may your trails be filled with wanderlust, and I will see you in the parks. Bye-bye!